There's a difference between a bit of a shock and an absolutely jaw-dropping moment. Horror's a genre that has these in abundance, offering up some of the wackiest, most unpredictable storylines around, and boy do we love them. I'm Amy from What Culture, and here are the 10 most jaw-dropping moments in horror. 10. The Boy. He's real, and he's in the walls. At first, The Boy seemed like a supernatural horror revolving around the beloved staple of the haunted doll. Lauren Cohen plays Greta Evans, an American who comes to the UK after being hired as a nanny by an elderly couple. She's charged with the care of a porcelain doll, whom she comes to believe is possessed by the spirit of a boy, Brahms, who died years earlier. When Greta's abusive ex tracks her down, he destroys this doll in a fit of rage, and as a consequence, Brahms goes berserk. From behind a mirror on the wall, an adult Brahms crashes into the room and murders the ex before turning on Greta. It turns out that he didn't die in a fire as we thought. Instead, he's been living in the walls of the house ever since with his parents and now Greta caring for him. It's not only a properly shocking moment because of the jump scare factor, but because this whole time we thought we were looking at a haunted doll when really a grown-ass man's been crawling around in the walls orchestrating everything. 9. The Others. It was them all along. Perhaps one of the most infamous twist endings in horror is that of The Others, where after an hour or so of tense, ghosty horror, we find out that our scared protagonists have been the ghosts all along. In a countryside home, Grace and her 2 young children live in relative seclusion. The kids have a condition that makes them extremely photosensitive, meaning that the house needs to be kept dark. The family and 3 servants occupy the house, but Grace begins to suspect that there are some others in there with them in the form of some ghosts or ghouls. Everything comes to a head towards the end of the film when the children discover the headstones of their servants on the house's grounds. The children are then discovered hiding in the house by an old woman who they believe to be a spirit, but it's revealed that she's actually a medium who's discovered the ghosts of the children and their mother in the house, who were actually all left dead in the house after a murder-suicide incident involving their mum. All along, the family and the servants have actually been the others to the people trying to move into the house, not vice versa. 8. The Orphanage. Finding Simon. The big mystery throughout The Orphanage is that of what happened to Simon, the adoptive son of Laura and Carlos, who came with them to visit the orphanage ahead of their plans to reopen it as a new facility. In an argument, Laura hits Simon, and as a consequence he runs off and hides, and he hides really damn well because she cannot find him. After 6 months of investigating and searching, Carlos and Laura still can't find their son. They enlist the help of a medium to conduct a seance at the orphanage to contact the spirits of the children murdered by a care worker. The spirits lead Laura to the entrance of a hidden room, where she then finds Simon's body. It's revealed that in her frenzy of looking for him the day he went missing, Laura had moved around some scaffolding to block the secret room's entrance, meaning that Simon couldn't get out of his hiding place. The crashing in the walls that day that she had believed to be a care worker abducting Simon had really just been him trying to get out, at which point he'd fallen and broken his neck. So, in trying to find her son, she really sentenced him to death. 7. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. The old fake-out. An oldie but a goldie, this 1920 horror offering was bringing the scare factor before most of us were even born. The body of the story is told from the perspective of a man named Francis, who recounts his and his wife's ordeal. He speaks of a crazed, insane asylum director called Caligari, who was experimenting with a sleepwalker trying to get them to commit murders whilst in an unconscious state. He recalls how his friend was murdered, his wife almost kidnapped, and how it all culminated in Caligari being apprehended and placed in his own asylum. Throughout the film, all we know to be the truth is what we're shown and told by Francis, so it's a real mind-boggler at the end to find out that he's made it all up. It turns out Francis himself is in the asylum, with his fellow patients being the subjects of his story. In his delusion, the real asylum director is the crazy man from the story, and we finally see Francis himself restrained and placed into the same cell we previously saw Caligari in as part of Francis's story. 6. Midsummer. The Cliff Jump. There are shocking moments aplenty in Midsummer, but one that shocked audiences and characters the most has to be the cliff jumping scene. Nothing can quite prepare you for the shock of seeing elderly people willingly throw themselves off a rock face to their own gruesome deaths. Midsummer's secluded Scandi community has a bunch of really weird traditions, and the one in question here is the ritual cenicide, in which elderly people who are unable to pull their weight in the community commit suicide by leaping off a cliff. Whether this really was a tradition embraced by many in antiquity or just a myth is unclear, but even if it used to happen in the days of old, that doesn't mean we were ready to see it in 2019. Our central group of friends watch on in abject horror as the elderly fall to the ground, either dying on impact or having their heads smashed in with a giant hammer. The whole scene is just one absolute shocker after another, and if you were able to watch this without your mouth gaping open in a perpetual scream, then you're stronger than me. 5. Wrong Turn 2021. The Court Scene. I would be lying if I said The Wrong Turn remake was a film I enjoyed overall, but I have to admit that the new spin on the old IP made for an interesting journey at least. Whether you were suspicious of the Foundation because you had residual fear from the first film, or just because you were rightly suspicious of them given their behaviour in the beginning of the movie, it's safe to say that none of us thought they were going to be the good guys. Calling them good is a bit of an overstatement in the long run, but for a moment, partway through the film, there was a shocker of a reveal that made it look like they might be the reasonable party. Early on in their mountain adventure, the group of friends we follow kill one of the Foundation members. In fairness, he and a colleague had been carrying one of the friends on a stick with a bag over his head, so it did look like they were going to kill him. When they're all captured and brought before a court of Foundation members, however, it's revealed that they were just carrying him back down the mountain. He was tied to a stick for ease of carrying because he was unconscious, and his head was in a bag to keep their location secret. For a moment, it really looked like the hikers had killed someone for absolutely no reason, and that they might be getting their just desserts by being sentenced. Obviously, it didn't really work out like this in the long run, but for a moment there, we really thought that the Foundation were really reasonable, lawful guys. 4. Would You Rather? It was all a waste of time. Would You Rather has an incredibly simple premise underpinned by one sad family story. A young woman named Iris is trying to pay for her brother's cancer treatment, and she's offered the chance to have it all paid for and get him a guaranteed bone marrow donor if only she wins a simple game of Would You Rather. The game, of course, isn't so simple after all. It involves torture, mutilation, and several murders. But Iris powers through. She survives almost being drowned, witnessing all manner of horrors, and eventually choosing to murder a man for her own monetary gain. All of this is, of course, in aid of her brother, for whom the money could potentially save and would guarantee him a donor. Thing is that after all this, she returns home to find that her brother has taken his own life, tragically feeling that he was a burden on his sister and not wanting to cause any more pain. Arguably, this made everything worse in every conceivable way, because not only will Iris now mourn the death of her brother, but she subjected herself to torture and committed a murder, all for absolutely nothing. 3. The Visit. The grandparents reveal. The Visit is one weird movie. There are a whole lot of really jarring moments. Naked grandma running around and scratching doors comes to mind, but no moment can top the fantastic final reveal. The story basically goes that two kids are visiting their grandparents for the first time ever. Their mum and their grandparents had a big falling out several years ago, which means the family's been split apart ever since, explaining why they've never met or talked or seen pictures of each other. Whilst staying at their grandparents' house, the kids notice some incredibly weird things. For example, the grandfather stores used adult nappies in the shed, and at night, the grandma goes feral and bangs on doors with knives. Eventually, it all gets too much and the kids beg their mum to come and get them, turning the webcam to show her their grandparents out in the yard. It's then that their mum tells them, "Those aren't your grandparents." It all only gets more wild from there, with the girl finding the corpses of their real grandparents in the basement and revealing that the strangers they've been staying with all week are escapees from a local mental asylum. It really is, as you say, a bit mental. 2. The Invisible Man 2020, A Murder in Plain Sight. I cannot rave about this movie enough. It's packed full of smart storytelling, twists and turns, and great performances. And one of the most spectacularly shocking moments sees the Invisible Man commit his first murder right there in plain sight. Cecilia is the ex-girlfriend of an abusive optics scientist named Adrian, who, after his supposed death, suspects that her ex is stalking her. He taunts her, drugs her, sets her up to split her apart from those that care about her, or from the comfort of beyond the grave. Obviously, nobody's going to believe you when you say your dead ex is stalking you, so Cecilia sets out to gather indisputable evidence and finds one of his invisibility suits. She arranges a meeting with her sister to plead her case and reveal the evidence. However, before she gets the chance to do so, an invisible force picks up a knife from the table, slits her sister's throat, and then places the knife in Cecilia's hand. Right in the middle of a busy restaurant, he's committed the perfect crime and framed Cecilia for it. It's endlessly frustrating and heart-wrenching to watch as Cecilia is tackled to the ground, screaming for her freshly murdered sister. If you get to show this film to a friend for the first time, watch them during this scene because I guarantee you their jaw will drop. 1. Malignant, The Killer Reveal. As we're releasing this video, this film is super new, so please, if you're planning on seeing it, then skip this entry. This is not something you want spoiled for you. The premise of the film is that our main character, Madison, is able to watch certain murders play out as they happen, as if she's somehow being psychically transported to the scene. She believes that an imaginary friend she had as a child is somehow involved, but recalls little about her situation at the time in which Gabriel, her imaginary friend, was actually present in her life. As it goes on, we establish that Gabriel is definitely more than just an imaginary friend. We see him being dragged about in the film's opening, we see him almost be physically caught by a police officer, and so we're left asking the question, who the hell is Gabriel and how is he linked to Madison? Safe to say, nobody guesses this twist before we get to it, in which it's revealed that Gabriel is Madison's parasitic twin, a conjoined twin who shares her brain and body and uses her body to commit the murders by locking her away in a prison in her mind. Whilst Madison sees herself just standing still and watching the murders unfold through a psychic link, really she's just unconscious and Gabriel is using her body to do his bidding. It's one hell of a twist and creates some unforgettable visuals, making this one of the most hyped and controversial horror releases of recent years. And that brings us to the end of this list of the 10 most jaw-dropping moments in horror. Tell us what your favourite shocking moments are in the comments down below, and remember to check out whatculture.com for more lists and articles like this every single day. As always, I've been Amy from What Culture, and I'll catch you next time.